At DAG, we wanted to change the way we did things, so we set our commission at 2% permanently. That's 2% on football, horse racing, golf, almost any sport. 2%. That's just one way that BetDAC is changing for the better. For the better, like you. BetDAC, the 2% commission exchange.
Over 18s only, please gamble responsibly.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Roker Report podcast, where you're greeted not by the dulcet Blythian tones of one Conor Bromley, but instead by the not Blythian but still dulcet tones of me, Alex McCain. As of last Sunday, Sunderland had the opportunity to cash in on their games in hand and potentially accumulate 6 points at home to Blackpool and Accrington Stanley. But 2 draws later, we have 2 points and our 4th place in the league going nowhere fast. So joining me today to chat about these frustrating encounters and what went down is Johnny Goldsmith, Josh
Hello.
Wilkinson and the Secretary of the Senior Supporters Association, Malcolm Bramley. So we'll start with you, Malcolm. How are you doing?
I'm all right, thanks, Alex.
Good stuff. Although I do hear that while you were at the game the other day, you had quite an unfortunate incident with your glasses.
A slight problem. A couple of days before the match, I'm sat at home, take my glasses off. A few minutes later, I sit down and there's a big crunch and my glasses virtually fall apart. So I'm stood at the back of the East Stand on Friday night with one arm of the glasses sellotaped on, the other's bent, and it was an absolute nightmare for 90 minutes. Talk about the match. I had a nightmare as well.
So were you holding your glasses like they do with like those pantomimes where they've got them like on a stick and you have to like hold it up to your face pretty much?
It was virtually
if that makes any sense.
I mean, some of your younger listeners might not remember, but I was like Jack Duckworth at Coronation Street, who used to wear glasses with great big plasters on either side to keep the arms together. So anyway, about an hour before we came on, I heard that my new glasses were ready. So I'm like a kid at Christmas this afternoon.
Tremendous. So how are you doing, Johnny? I can't see you behind the monitor there, but
yeah, not too bad. I managed to get to the game on Friday, and it's like messed up my clock because I'm like, oh, today's Sunday. Oh, I can't remember the last time I had a Friday night game. I think it was against Burnley back in like 2006 or something.
Yeah, and what about you, Josh? How are you?
Very well, mate. Very well. Third podcast, just part of the furniture now, I feel.
Good to, yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? You sat in what was once my seat.
Yes.
I'm looking at you through the monitors, just like
I like it.
Just like Connor before me. But yeah, so I'll just quickly summarise the game, and then we'll get into dissecting them both chronologically. Sunderland squandered the first of their 2 opportunities to catch Barnsley when they drew 1-1 with Blackpool. First of all, the visitors taking the lead through what was admittedly a very tidy finish from one Armand Nangelay, if that's hopefully how you say his name. But the lads toiled away in the second half and eventually found an equaliser from a corner, which we can apparently score now, taken by Grant Ledbetter and headed home route 1 by Jack Baldwin. But sadly, the same Jack Baldwin who got us back into the game against Blackpool was the villain of the piece when we played Stanley, Baldwin giving away a penalty which Billy Key then converted and was generally quite poor as the game progressed, with the visitors then finding a second in the second half on the break through Paul Smith. However, the introduction of one Chris Maguire from the bench turned the tide almost instantly for Sunderland, and he set up both the goals to level the scoreline, with the game ending 2-2. So disaster averted, but the situation still far from ideal. So the Stanley game's fresh in our minds, but for the sake of doing this, as I say, chronologically, let's start analysing the Blackpool game. So on the last pod, we cried out for Ross to drop Power for 09, and he did just that, helped by the fact that obviously Power was having another child, but, hey-ho, he was dropped regardless. So, Josh, we'll start with you. How effective do you think that ended up being?
I mean, clearly not very effective.
No.
I remember us saying that, because Connor asked at the end, it was like, what if you were Jack Ross? Oh, sorry, no, it was, what do you think Jack Ross is going to do?
Yeah.
What is he going to change? And I remember at the time I was thinking, well, very little. Because that was the game 09 was right back, wasn't he? So he didn't directly replace Power, he was right back, right? Yeah. And
I think he did. He did play right back. Yeah.
So obviously not a direct replacement.
No.
I mean, I had a bit of a nightmare with the SAFC stream, if I'm honest.
Right.
So I caught about 60 minutes of it. I don't know. It's just there seemed to be a flatness, which I'm sure we'll get on to Stanley in a bit later. But I think the most frustrating thing about Blackpool was the amount of long balls that just seemed to be our
Absolutely
our tactic that game. And it kind of seemed to be the tactic of Stanley until Maguire came on.
Yeah.
And then we started playing those nice little triangles that we played at the start of the season.
Yeah, I think big physical teams can do that to us. You can see an awful lot of long balls coming through, and if as long as you've got sort of teams like Stanley who can just sort of frustrate and can capitalise on the crowd turning against us, then they're always going to find a way into the game or find a way to extend whatever they've got already.
Exactly. And I think with Power, I think if you're going to bring him off, you need to bring on Maguire, who's very different.
Yeah.
Because what we're crying out for is someone who will come to the centre-backs, because the reason they're hitting it long is because they've got no one to pass to, and they're not very good on the ball, so they just think, well, just get rid.
Yeah.
So if we have Maguire who can kind of come short, recycle it, that's what we're crying out for, and I'm not really sure why he's not getting his chance at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's been pointed out by quite a few people down, but there's a definite correlation between the games Maguire has featured in for us this season and the number of games we've won. You know, he's a very intelligent player, I think, in the middle of the park. He's a very tidy passer. He's very good at his general decision making. I think where some players in League One would just play a long ball to get rid, Maguire would maybe take a touch, find a pass, manoeuvre past his man and put it out wide. Yeah. I mean, what do you think, Malcolm? What have you made of Maguire this season? Do you think that he could potentially make a difference in this side?
I think he's been very steady.
Yeah.
He passes the ball well. I think he's quite an intelligent player. And we have to wonder why he hasn't been played. But we don't know what goes on in the training field, 4 or 5 days a week. People have said that has Jack Ross got his favourites? I don't buy that. And I think there must be a very clear reason why he hasn't been picked and hasn't been played on a regular basis. From the outside, from a spectator's point of view, from what I've seen of him, I would play him every game. But I think we have to remember, we don't know what's going on the training field. Yeah,
there's only so much we as fans can know compared to what Ross will know about his team and about what's going on either on or off the pitch. I think there's a definite sort of area there we need to consider. But as for the game itself, what do you think went right and went wrong against Blackpool?
Well, I think again, as we've just been saying, long balls up to forwards who are never going to win a header in the air. Yeah. So the ball keeps coming back again. I would like to see more play from the back. Yeah. But it's whether we're good enough to play from the back. That's the other issue.
Yeah, I think Baldwin often fancies himself as being a very sort of like.
He thinks he's David Luiz.
Yeah, he does, doesn't he? Yeah. He thinks he's the ball playing defender, which he really isn't. I think if he was, at times when he's on the ball, sort of taken out of defence, I think momentarily he thinks he's a player that isn't in League One. Right. I think that's him. I think so. I think there's a lot of sort of.
Well, that penalty must have brought him down.
Yeah,
they got to.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
Yeah, but I think if you take the long balls, but then even if you avoid the long balls, the passing out from the back this season has been poor, to say the least. And it's such a simple game, football. Brief Cloughy story. I'm in the dressing room when I'm secretary at Derby. About 10 minutes before a game started, I had to take a message into the dressing room, and Cloughy's there, giving his team talk 10 minutes before the players are going out. And none of the folders that you see nowadays, all the folders with all the numbers and the teams on and the modern technology. No. It was all straightforward. He sat on the bench next to one of the players. And he says, "Young man, you're looking very smart today." "Thank you, boss." "What colour shirt are you wearing?" He said, "I'm wearing a white shirt, boss." "And what's the young man next to you? What colour strips he got on?" "Well, he's got a white shirt as well." And he said, "Listen, you lot." He said, "I know you're all thick as shit, but basically, if you go out there, you've got a white shirt on. All you've got to do and all you've got to remember is pass to somebody that's got the same colour shirt as you've got on, and you might actually manage to win the game. Now get yourselves out." And that was his team talk. It's a simple game.
Well, that's all you'd expect from Brian Clough, isn't it? Sometimes the most simple strategies are the most effective.
That's right.
I think that does tie into a lot of what we're seeing. I think there's a lot of play from the back that's either just. I think there's two extremes. I think sometimes we see long balls that are just sort of hit aimlessly upfield in the hopes that 5'9" Will Gregg's going to shake off two massive League One defenders, get the ball and score from nowhere. And then equally, I think there's a lot of playing out from the back with people like Baldwin, who, as solid as I think he is, or has been overall this season, I think is just a bit too ambitious with what he can do with it. But I think there is a medium there, and I do think that there is the quality in this team to not have to hoof long balls, but equally to not go too far. I mean, we've not heard from you yet, Johnny. What do you think about our sort of... I mean, we haven't really found an identity yet this season, but what do you make of the passing game we've played so far this season?
It's weird because we've been a team in the early start of the season where we're winning like 3-0, 4-1. We're beating teams fairly easily, and it seems like, it's going to be an easy, good season for us. And then I don't know what changed, really. Things just started to not go as well. I mean, we haven't lost many games, but we're just drawing all these games.
Yeah, we're drawing the league.
And, like, there isn't much that's changed in terms of the team and the players. I don't really know what's the problem is. Obviously, there's a few new players in now, but, this was going on long before January.
Yeah.
So it's hard to put a finger on what it is that's been a problem this season.
Do you think our dip in form is possibly correlated with the style of passing that's sort of changed from the start of the season? There were a lot of games at the start against teams like Gillingham, Rochdale and Scunthorpe, I believe, were probably the biggest cases of this, where we played, quite an aggressive sort of, direct on the floor passing game, and we would have half an hour spell where we'd just absolutely rent teams asunder.
Yeah.
We'd absolutely devastate them with the quality we have, but that doesn't seem to be something that we do anymore in games.
Well, we saw it for a bit against Accrington.
Yeah.
In those 20-30 minutes where we kind of blew them away, really.
Yeah.
Because, like I said earlier, it was those little triangles where we have Maguire and McGeady getting very close together, but they're both technically good enough
and that
to where they can
Accy's...
do that. And then we saw the difference in when he played to Greg on the floor. His one little flick when he took it past.
Oh, it was
unlucky not to score. When he let it go through his legs and went through the other fella's legs, should have passed it to McGeady in that sense. But I can see why he saw his name up in lights. So that works, and it did at the start of the season, and it clearly still does. So I'm not sure why we're going away from it. And my worry is, I think I've mentioned a couple of times that Wyke should be playing with someone, and Wyke needs a goal. I'm running out of patience with him, if I'm honest. I think we play with one. We play with one, and we play the system we did for the last 30, 40 minutes, whatever it was at Accrington. Because Wyke, God, I want it to work for him.
He's really trying.
He tries.
He
really tries. I've got no qualms with that.
No.
But he should have scored when that 09 got that cross in. I mean, he put it on a play for him.
Yeah.
If he wins a header, which is less often than it should be, it doesn't go to anyone.
Yeah, there's
in
something.
Our side.
There's something very Daryl Murphy-esque.
It's not happening at the moment. Yeah. And I think he needs some time out the side.
He's got a difficult choice there, hasn't he, really? Yeah. There's either you look at his goal-scoring record, and Ross obviously rates him, otherwise he wouldn't have signed him. But then you think the number of chances he's missed, maybe he's not fully fit. Take him out, and his confidence looks shot. But then you take him out of the side, and is that going to do an awful lot for his confidence? So, real dilemma for the manager there.
Yeah,
I think
go on, Johnny.
One quick thing I will say, an example of that I would say is Chris Maguire. Like, he was dropped out the side for a little while because he has been fairly poor, and he's come back into the side and changed the game. And maybe it's just he thought, oh, hang on a second, I'm not guaranteed a place in this team. I've got to work for my place. And Max Power had a fairly good game against Accrington when he came on, I think. Another player who maybe, he's not guaranteed his position as he thinks he might be, so then he has to work hard to stay in the team. So maybe this is a wake-up call for someone like Maguire to think, actually, I've got to be consistent with my performances.
Yeah, I think this might as well be a case of us not... I mean, we'll say there that, with the case of Wyke, as you point out, Malcolm, how do you approach that for the sake of consolidating what confidence he's got? Do you take him out the side to maybe get him out the spotlight? Is that best for him? Or is it best to keep him in? I think there's pros and cons to both there. When you would only really know the best approach if you knew the lad personally, which as fans just sat here in a studio, we don't. Yeah. And that's when I think you have to put your faith in Ross to know his players as individuals and potentially make the right decision. And speaking of individuals, another sort of key talking point here was, for me, Duncan Watmore. He seemed to divide a lot of opinion. I've heard, one half of the social media populace saying that he seemed to think he was one of, if not our most threatening players on the night against Blackpool, while the other half just saw him as wasteful in possession and generally quite frustrating. So,
well, I watched for 10 minutes of the game against Blackpool. I watched Watmore rather than following the ball. And whatever you think of Watmore, and some call him a head-down merchant and all the rest of it, I tell you what, he made half a dozen tremendous runs in that 10 minutes that I was watching him, and nobody picked him up. and there was a level of frustration from him there. And he is another very, very intelligent player. And again, it's whether the manager sticks with him, plays him on a regular basis. I think it's clear that he can't play 2 matches in a week.
No. Given his recent recovery from injury, I think that's not a thing you would do.
But I do think his pace on out wide. I think his pace will worry defenders.
Yeah, I think again, it's how you use him. I think you need to. He's not the type of guy who's going to take on, a lot of defenders. I don't think.
No.
I think a lot of times he gets caught under his own feet.
Yeah.
Panics a little bit. I think he needs to be used to stretch games. So you need to knock it over. If you can put him up against a short fullback, which we were doing against Stanley when McGeady was having a lot of luck on their right hand side, because their right back was quite short, so it was easy just to knock it over him, and then McGeady was getting in. I think if you have Watmore in that kind of situation, I think it works. But I mean, it was essentially a front two, wasn't it? And Watmore is not a striker.
No. I think while I do rate Watmore as an option in this division, I think his finishing is I think we're probably all in agreement that it's quite poor. I mean, at the same time, though, this is a lad who has done it in the Premier League to an extent.
Exactly.
If you think the last goal he'd scored before he got...
Norwich?
It was against Norwich when we beat them 3-0. I mean, bear in mind, I'm pretty sure that if you gave me a pair of footy boots and a run out, I could beat Sebastian Bassong. But that being said, he has done it at quite a high level, and he's a perfectly capable player.
He was half decent that season.
He was. If you were to give Watmore 70, 80, possibly a full 90 minutes just to run at the team all game, I think eventually he's going to create something. He is. I don't think teams in this division can put up with someone who's got that much pace and that much tenacity for that amount of time. His finishing isn't great, but if you can depend on him to make the right decisions, then I think we'd reap the rewards if we just kept him there. Equally, I think he might work as an impact sub.
Yeah,
but either way, I think. But yeah,
I think best from the bench.
Yeah, I can imagine so. I think if you were to bring on, I remember we played. I think it was a few seasons ago. We played Tottenham. I mean, obviously it's a few because we're playing Tottenham. It wasn't anything recently, but. I think we lost 1-0 that day while we had Advocat, and they brought on 2 players from the bench at the same time on about the 70-minute mark, and I think it was Andros Townsend and another pacey player, and they just ran at us for the remainder of that game, and we looked shot because you just suddenly you introduced that much pace at once, and both your flanks were just like overwhelmed. I think if we could do that with, say, Watmore and Gooch, I think that could be a great idea going forward. It's also a favourite tactic of mine on Footy Manager. But,
so that's why you want to do it.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to pretend that I'm anywhere near as good as the likes of Jack Ross, but it's worked for me on a footballing simulator. So. Yeah, sure, whatever.
You never know.
I think whether you start with Watmore or not, the one thing I would like to see is a settled side. Jack Ross, barring injuries, of course, Jack Ross deciding on his best side, and whether 1 or 2 players don't perform on the day or whatever, have a side that's playing together for half a dozen games. Yeah. I think Luton, for example, I don't know in the last few matches, but before Christmas, they played 8 matches and they were completely unchanged. Right. Any team that's going to get promotion or playoffs or whatever, one thing they do, which is obvious, they win football matches rather than draw them. But the other thing is the majority of them have a settled side. Players know each other's game. And I know that we've got a big squad, but and all this business about, well, you've got to keep players happy. I don't buy that. No. Pick your best 11 and keep with them. And we'll start winning games. We've got good enough players.
At the end of the day, it's a meritocracy. That's how you do professional football. You don't just rotate to keep everyone, as you say, happy. You play your best side because you're in this competition to win it. That's how the adult world of professional football works. And as you say with Luton, they're a consistent side, and they've been consistently good all season, and they're at the point now where they could run away with the title. So I think that's case in point, Malcolm. But speaking of players who struggle to finish, will Griggs miss in the one-on-one? Big yikes. Should we be concerned that he hasn't been finding the net yet?
No.
No?
Nope.
Is that a unanimous no?
No, I agree.
No, he's getting in the right places. I think he was unlucky against Accrington. I think the first one when James pulled it back, it's a hard thing to do. Yeah. Because you're trying to put it one way when it's coming to you another way, if that makes any sense. Yeah. It's tricky to do.
Yeah,
there was a few players on the line already, so he didn't have a lot to aim at. He's still coming back from an injury. He's still, that was his first full game?
Yeah, I believe so.
I think he came.
I think that might have been.
Or maybe second. Not sure on that one.
He's not had many.
No, he hasn't had a lot of football.
No.
I think it was certainly his first home game.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting used to playing at the Stadium of Light as well. But Accrington, I thought it was very good. I do. Yeah, I do. Thought it was very good. I thought it was very exciting. I think, like I said earlier, it's just how you use them is so important. I think he likes it in behind in the channels. He likes it to his feet.
Yeah. Yeah, he likes a ground war, I think, Will Grigg. I think we saw, as you say, I think you said earlier, I think you did say earlier, when we play football on the ground against teams like that against Stanley when we brought Maguire on, Grigg was thriving. He looked for me very important. That one chance when he just like flicked it round the player and he had 2 shots blocked. I mean, that was...
And no one's talking about his assist for Honeyman's goal as
well.
No,
exactly.
Great,
he made a goal.
And then that started the comeback.
Exactly. I think the good thing is he's getting into positions to score. It would be worrying if he wasn't getting into the sort of positions where he's got a half a chance. And like any other striker, I think he needs a goal. Once you get that goal, your confidence comes. And I think we've got a good player there.
Definitely. I think, again, similar to Wyke, I think, he just needs a goal. And we'll see a different player. Once Greg gets that first goal, he'll found his feet almost, and it'll be fine. He'll get the goals.
Well, I do hope so. So let's move. We've sort of segued into the Stanley game there, so we'll go fully into sort of that one now. And the main talking point, the only real one for me, is the fact that Sunderland, as we've said, before and after Maguire's introduction, were 2 completely different sides. The first had no ideas. They were pumping long balls. They were terrified of the home crowd that was getting more and more on the backs with every misplaced pass. The second side was one that was just unrelenting going forward. They were playing great football on the ground. McGeady won everything from the players in the middle and fed it through to whoever was, racing up with him. They were very, very unlucky for me not to get a third goal. And I think that side, once they got it right, they were playing like a good team. Sadly, it was too little too late, but it all hinged, I think, for me, and as you'd all probably agree, on Maguire's introduction. So what is it about Maguire that adds something to a team? What is it about him? Is it his character? Is it his technique? What is it?
Well, first of all, aggression for me. I mean, you might think he's always on the edge, always having a risk of a yellow. He's always arguing with the referee. But he's got that bit of aggression that we don't see in many of the other players.
No.
And I thought, like you've just said, he made all the difference when he came on. And we could easily have won the game. If it lasted another 5 minutes, I think we'd have won it. But again, like McGeoch, you again wonder what's going on in the training field as to why he hasn't been played regularly. So I just hope we see a bit more of him in the next 2 or 3 matches.
I think he needs to start on Tuesday.
Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah. I think that's what you need when you're possibly low on confidence. I think Chris Maguire isn't the type of character who's going to shy away from a understandably, quite frustrated crowd. I think he's just there. His character can just bring out, I think, the best in a team that requires aggression. I think he's just quite a...
He just always wants the ball as well.
Yeah.
His willingness. I mean, as soon as he came on, one of the first things he did, whack it in the box. And then we got the Honeyman goal from it. It was almost straight away. And then that just builds the crowd. And then we had the next 10 minutes. That was like watching us at the start of the season. We were great. I mean, it was a great match.
Yeah.
From a neutral point of view.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It was probably a great watch. Tough as a Sunderland
very
fan.
hot
Probably very tough
as a
Accrington fan.
Yeah.
Probably gutted.
I mean, we all have different opinions about players, but I think there'll be a big frustration on Tuesday night when the teams are announced if that lad's not in the starting lineup.
Absolutely. I'd be quite annoyed if he wasn't in the team. I think Chris Maguire, I was trying to find a way to articulate it before, but I just think he's all heart. I think that's exactly what you need to galvanise you. You need someone who's just going to run at the opposition, harry other players, just someone who can run past you and just shout when you're ready to keep you going. When you're going to pick the ball up for a throw, and just someone who can just marshal you as a team. Not someone who's necessarily like a captain figure, but just someone who's just loud and aggressive and just wants the team to push forward and just be as aggressive to the opposition as possible.
He's also very good at holding the ball up as well, which I don't think he gets a lot of credit for.
No, he doesn't.
He's very strong, and he's very good at kind of, when it's in the air, he can hold off his man, take a touch because he's technically good enough, and then turn and then put it out wide or carry on going. And I don't think we have that enough, because a lot of the times when it's being chucked forward, as you mentioned earlier, it's just coming straight back because it's just, it's just flying off our players.
Yeah,
but he keeps it.
He does.
So I think that was a big factor in it as well. Like, if we were struggling, if Accrington were coming back, we can kind of get it out, and Maguire will hold it up. And
Yeah, I think it's a very sort of Chris Maguire-esque move. I think if I was to picture him playing football, I'd imagine him trapping a ball, spinning on his heel.
Against Peterborough.
Yeah, shoving another player, bringing his wide men into the game, putting a pass through, taking a shot from outside the box. That's just what I imagine Chris Maguire doing. And I think, when you're playing quite sort of ponderous football that almost looks like it's good, but as soon as something is about to go right, you just hit a long ball. I think that's who you need in that scenario. And speaking of players' characters, I think it would probably be quite remiss if we didn't mention how poor Jack Baldwin and Jimmy Dunn were against Stanley. I think both of them, it's fair to say, had a shocker and looked more and more at sea the more the crowd began to turn. I think they both just looked quite nervous, and Paul Smith really just had a field day against them.
Yeah.
What was the issue there, do we think? What do you think we could do with that defence? Could we maybe use a more experienced presence at the back, or do you think it's just a case of them two needing to gel? Is it maybe the fact that they're both young lads? What do you think?
Maybe it is giving them time to gel. You give them a bit of patience and things can work out. But when you've got the crowd who are on your back, the minute you make a mistake, it's hard for them to cooperate and work together. I mean, I prefer Flanagan personally.
Yeah.
Flanagan and Baldwin, I think, work well together. Obviously, Jimmy Dunn being the lone player, I guess they want to try and give him as much game time as they can. So they're going to have to find a way to make it work around him, I guess. I think they pick either Flanagan or Baldwin, not both of them, perhaps. I think if you might have to drop Baldwin at the game on Tuesday and play Flanagan instead.
Yeah. Baldwin and Dunn are both, all Baldwin, Flanagan and Dunn are all big lads, but the difference between Dunn and the other two is that Dunn is just a lot more bulky. He's got that sort of physical strength. That's the kind of strength that got us the equaliser against Oxford. So I think attribute...
I think Baldwin was the worst of the two, if I have to pick one.
Oh, absolutely. He gave away the penalty. But
yeah, that was shocking, but their second goal, Dunn has a lot to answer for, I think.
Definitely, I think.
Because if you watch it back, he's just kind of jogging back, doesn't have a clue where Smith is.
No.
Should be there to head that away. How is Smith winning a header?
No.
5 yards away.
Yeah, against,
that he didn't have a clue was there, and that kind of, I watched that back, and obviously Baldwin shouldn't have let the crossing anyway. They both had a nightmare. But that worried me when I watched that. Yeah.
Yeah, that Paul Smith, as we say, he thrived on the sort of nervousness of those two. And I think that's potentially where you might think, it feels almost like bizarre that you're saying this, but like a figure like John O'Shea, given the fact that, yes, he's 38, I wouldn't want him here now, playing against, anyone who...
Is Kabul still a free agent?
I was worried with the build-up to the penalty.
Yeah.
Because that 50-50 in the box... I could have won the ball even with my broken specs. It was just powder puff stuff. And terrible. It looked after that, it looked as though his head had gone. It really did. I actually felt sorry for him in the end.
It's such a typical thing for a Sunderland fan. Like, you should never mention the stats of, Accrington haven't scored in 6 games.
Exactly.
No, you know exactly what's going to happen.
We'll give you a goal.
We're going to give away a stupid penalty.
Yeah. I will say it was a well-taken penalty, by the way. I will say that.
It was, yeah. I really don't know what to say. I think, as you say, Malcolm, I did feel quite sorry for him as well. I think, he's not... How old's Baldwin? 24?
I think, about that.
He's relatively speaking, he's a young lad in football.
Do you think
he's just given up? Yeah, sorry.
We need a leader at the back, because we don't really seem to have a leader.
Yeah, perhaps
because they were a bit all over the place. Weren't they? We need someone kind of saying, "Oi, Luke, come in."
Yeah,
they were never in a line.
No,
as far as I could see.
I think perhaps Glenn Louvens would have been shortlisted as a viable option for that, but that was
probably the idea.
Been less than good. Yeah.
I keep forgetting he's here, to be honest.
No, he's still injured, isn't he? Or is he? Or is he just? Is he just out the picture? Last time I checked, he was injured. But he's not had a particularly great run so far, has he? No. Really, Louvens.
Well, you're banging the Ozturk drum, aren't you?
Honestly, if I'm banging the Ozturk drum kit, like if I've got the full thing, I'm crashing. Yeah, let's just jump straight into that. Ali Öztürk, do we think he is an option if these two were to continue to underperform? He's had a decent run in the checker trade so far. Fair enough, when we played against Man City's under-21s, you're not playing the most prestigious team in the world there. They are.
But you're playing against pace.
You're playing against pace.
They were struggling against.
He made an absolutely cracking tackle, a sliding tackle in the box.
Yeah,
which I think, you put that side by side with the one him and Baldwin made in the box. Obviously, one gave away a penalty and one was pinpoint. is there maybe a shout there if these two sort of
I
dip
wouldn't
in
be
form?
against it.
No,
Something's not working, so something needs to change. Maybe give it a try.
yeah,
He's the lad played well in some of the cup games.
yeah,
But again, coming back to the earlier point, at some stage you've got to start playing a settled team. Otherwise, they talked about Ranieri being the Tinkerman.
Yeah.
Well, if this keeps on going, old Ross will be getting a bit of a name of a Tinkerman as well. You've got to try a settled side, and it must be a nightmare, for a keeper, to having different players playing in front of you every game. So I would stick with Baldwin and Flanagan myself.
You would take Dunn out?
Yes, I would.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, I think, as you say,
I don't think I can't see, other than some maybe additional height, I can't see what he's brought to us so far.
No. Well, to be honest, really, I think that that physicality and the sort of his ability to read the game for me up until Stanley had been very good. But I think then there could be a drawback of his inexperience. And as you say, if you're rotating your back line and you've just got young lads replacing young lads, and there's going to be, I think, a lot of nervousness when things start going wrong. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of ambiguity there, a lot of difficulty in communication. So, to be honest, Malcolm, you might be on the dot there. I think playing your more experienced players as your sort of like go-to back two, you could see that consistency. You could build that synergy, and that could be maybe what you need to just sort of. Well, if anything, just to reassure each other, especially when the crowd is going to turn when you go 1-0 down to Stanley on TV. So you might need that just for their own ability to sort of console themselves and get the heads back together when things go wrong. But one last point on the two games, just before we go into a more of an interview sort of format with Malcolm here, is the case with Grigg and Wyke. Now, as we've said, we're not too worried, but the fact remains that Grigg hasn't got going yet. And I'm starting to fear, and I'm sure many others are, that Wyke is never going to start getting going. And with Keziah Sterling being very much an unknown quantity, being just a young lad from Spurs who's never played professional football before, you really don't know what's going to happen there. So that makes you wonder, might it have been an idea to hold on to Andy Nelson? I mean, last I checked, he'd scored 4 in 5 for Dundee in all competitions, with 3 of those coming from 3 games in the SPL. 3 and 3 in the Scottish Premier League. Given that we're a League One team, you might think that those two divisions could potentially be equivalent in quality. You might even argue the SPL slightly better, in my opinion. So, given the fact that he's doing it there, could it have been an idea just to keep him here, just for an option?
Certainly wouldn't have hurt.
No.
But again, we talked about it earlier. We don't see what happens on the training ground. We don't know what happens behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I was kind of surprised to see him go, because I thought the new idea of this ownership and stuff was to build these young players and then use them, and so you can sell them on and make a profit, and that was going to be part of the business model, if you like. So I was surprised to see that happen. Having said that, hindsight is a wonderful thing.
It is, yeah.
He could have gone there and not scored in 10, and we'd have been like, phew.
Yeah, I think
so.
When he went, there weren't really that many eyebrows raised on the whole.
No one was really saying that was shocking.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe a few that had seen him play.
There must have been some reason why Ross let him go. You can't imagine the lad was on particularly high wages in terms of getting somebody off the wage bill.
No, the youth contracts are a pittance, if I remember rightly.
So, as I say, there must have been some reason, and good luck to the lad. He's knocking goals in.
Yeah. Well, that's fair enough, I think.
What can you do?
It's like it's done now. It might have been good to have him, but he might not have scored 3 and 3 here. Just you would never know. And he's like, well, he's gone now, so can't do anything about it.
I'm excited. I want to see Sterling have a crack though.
Absolutely.
I think he's had a niggle, hasn't he? So he hasn't been playing.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see him in that if we're playing a front four, because he's probably. I mean, I would hope he's just going to be fearless. I hope he's just going to go for it.
Yeah, I'd like him.
Kind of what we're missing as well.
I think it's understandable if a player's playing badly to obviously
overthink
to be quite sort of negative towards them when they're on the pitch. But I would like to think that we as fans and him himself will see this opportunity for Sterling as having very little to lose. I'd like him just to come on and just have a go and see how he gets on. I think if worst case scenario, he has an absolute shocker here, scores no goals, it was a bad loan signing, but at the same time I can't feel too negatively towards a young lad who's just trying to have a go. So I'd like him to approach the whole situation and just think, you know what, I'm here to try and get my professional career off the ground. if I get a few goals at Sunderland, that could see who knows where I could go from there. I'd just like to see him have a go, really.
Yeah.
I think as a young kid, you should just let him have his chance without judgment.
Well, I think the one thing is the crowd will have some sympathy with him early on. Again, his problem will be if he comes on 2 or 3 games and doesn't score. Then again, the frustrations start.
Some exchange betting companies run short-lived promotions, like months-long offers of low commission. At BetDAG, we wanted to change the way we did things, so we set our commission at 2% permanently. That's 2% on football, horse racing, golf, almost any sport. 2%. That's just one way that BetDAG is changing for the better. For the better, like you. BetDAG, the 2% commission exchange.
Over 18s only, please gamble responsibly.
Let's move away from the current events. You've come today basically, Malcolm, and you've agreed to share some of your stories from the days of your supporting the lads. So let's start with a pretty general question just to get the ball rolling. In all your years going to see the lads at Roker Park, what were your most outstanding memories?
Well, I've got some great memories of Roker Park. I always wish that some of the younger fellas, you lot included here today, could have experienced Roker Park in the 1960s, particularly, long before half the Roker end got taken down because of safety issues. And it was, I know you can always look back at something with maybe rose-tinted spectacles, but I think it was a magical place, Roker Park, particularly in the 60s, particularly night games. And you'd have people coming straight from the pits, straight from the shipyards, not spending hours in the pub. A lot of people used to be in the ground well before kick-off. Not like now. You look at the stadium now 10 minutes before the game, and it's still half empty.
Vacant, yeah. Everyone's in the concourse.
Used to be virtually full an hour before the game. You didn't have the situation where players warmed up. That's a relatively new thing, that players come on for half an hour. So there was the build-up, the excitement of looking at the tunnel, waiting for the players to come out. You've got the peanut sellers who would walk around the side of the pitch, and people would shout from the back that they wanted the peanuts. It was peanuts, tanner a bag, and the blokes used to throw these peanut bags with like Exocet missiles, and they always used to get to the person that had asked for them.
Right.
And there's a great clip on YouTube of a cup tie that we played against Everton, and it was during the winter. And of course, during the winter, no undersoil heating in those days, and the straw used to have to go down the pitch, and everybody mucked in. It was great to see everybody helping out with the seats in the close season, but supporters used to come and help to put the straw out, and then on the day of the game, straw used to come back and go onto the edge of the pitch. And there's a great YouTube clip of scoring, and the great bank of Roker Park and the Roker end surging forward, and kids at the front getting bales of straw, bits of straw, and throwing them up in the air. If anybody wants to see what the Roker Park crowd was really like, they want to look at that. YouTube, v Everton 1964. It was a great experience being able to watch football in those days. And before I started at the club as an office boy, when I was 13 or 14, there was one big match that I think sort of summed up what Roker Park was like. We played Tottenham Hotspur in the Cup, 4th of March 1961. And in those days, Tottenham were the team. They'd got some great players, and they'd hardly lost a match in the First Division up till then, and they'd had a good cup run. So this was a great draw for Sunderland, playing the mighty Tottenham Hotspur. And it was an all-ticket match. I was 14, just 14, and my dad let me and a friend go and queue the night before so that we could virtually guarantee ourselves a ticket. So we're outside the old clock stand at 4 o'clock, the day before they were selling tickets at 10 o'clock the next morning. And there were thousands and thousands and thousands of people.
With the same idea? Same
idea, queuing overnight.
Wow.
Great atmosphere, if you can imagine that. I mean, no sleeping bags, something like that. So absolutely fantastic atmosphere. And then the game itself, 61,000.
Crikey.
And Tottenham scored in the first half. And then we equalised in the second half. And there was a huge pitch invasion. And Danny Blanchflower, who was a famous player for Tottenham, wrote in his autobiography that he'd played football all over the world in some of the biggest stadiums, and it was the biggest noise that he'd ever heard a crowd make. And he reckoned that had the pitch not been invaded by the crowd, Sunderland would probably have gone on and won that game. And as it happened, Tottenham won, and they went on to do the double, which I think was, at the time, was only the second time that it had actually been done in that century.
Right. Oh.
So that was one of the great games. But at Roker Park, you had you had the big floodlights. You didn't have the floodlights on the top of the stands that you have now. And when I joined the club as a 15-year-old office boy, I think I was 16 when George Crowe, the secretary, said, "Have you got a head for heights?" And I said, "Well, yeah, not too bad. Why?" He said, "Well, the electrician is up one of the floodlight pylons at the Roker end, and there's a spare bulb come, and you're going to have to climb the floodlights and take him up to him." So, as I mentioned in a previous podcast, being part of a football club, whether you're in the office or whether you're a player, is all about mickey taking. So I thought this is a wind up, and I said, "Are you sure, Mr. Crowe? Yeah, you get yourself up there." And I think I must be one of the few people, other than people like electricians, who actually climbed up to the top of one of the pylons at the Roker end and had this wonderful view of the empty stadium. And I survived. But I must admit, going down, I froze halfway down, and I thought, "This is it, my end's come." So
when you say you froze,
I just thought, "That's it. I can't go any further. Can't go any further." It's like, I used to do a bit of rock climbing, and I gave that up because I froze.
Yeah.
When I got a bit older, but I managed to get to the bottom.
Did you just get to like a certain point going down, and were you just like very aware of where you were?
Yeah. I think the mistake I made, I looked down. Down.
I bet.
Yeah. And the other thing you had at Roker Park, which you don't have now, you'd got the old scoreboard, the old wooden scoreboard that was between the Roker end and the clock stand. And the only way that people knew what the half-time scores were they had to buy a programme. So you'd got, in the back of the programme, you'd got A, B, C, D, E, and the list of the players. And then one of my jobs was through the Press Association. Again, no mobile phones, computers in those days. I had to ring through to the Press Association at half-time and then ring through to the scoreboard with the half-time scores. So you'd say A, 1-1, B, 2-2. And talk about tricks and all the rest of it. Charlie Hurley comes up to the office one day and he said, "Do you want to earn yourself a tenner?" So I said, "Yeah, tenner is a lot of money in those days." He said, "Right, home match on Saturday." He said, "What I want you to do," he said, "I want you to ring through with the half-time scores, look for what letter Newcastle are, and say the letter D or E or whatever, and ring through and tell them that Newcastle are losing 5-0 at half-time, and I'll give you a tenner." So I thought, well, I'm going to do it. Just anything for a laugh. So I get the scores, I ring through. Right, we come to D. Whoever they were playing, 5, Newcastle 0. And there was a massive roar went up from the crowd. And then, of course, a minute later, I had to ring through. "Oh, I'm sorry, I've misheard it. It's actually 0-0. So the letters get
What a
changed.
random miss here.
0-0, and
Easily happens.
and then the crowd starts booing. What I didn't realise was Charlie came up on the Monday with the tenner, and he said, "Well, thanks for doing that." He said, "I've made myself a few quid." I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Well, all the players had a bet on whether you do it or not." He said, "I've made myself about 200 quid.
Right, well, giving you a tenner's quite easy in that case.
Yeah.
No skin off his nose.
Yeah. So no Roker Park, great days.
Yeah.
And I think one of the other big games was moving on a couple of years. Coincidentally, was the 4th of March again. In 1964, that was the year that we won promotion from the old second division. But we got drawn against Manchester United in the Cup. First round was at Old Trafford, and we're winning 3-1 near the end. Then big Charlie Hurley backheads the ball. Monty's come out, and it's 3-2. And then Man United equalised right in the last minute. So we've got a replay on the Tuesday night. Now, by this time, I'm assistant secretary, and I had to sit in on some board meetings when George Crowe, the secretary, Eddie Marshall weren't available. And there'd been this discussion before the first match at Old Trafford about whether the game should be made all ticket or not. And the directors, you talk about finances in football these days, the directors decided that they didn't think we'd got a chance at Old Trafford, so they weren't going to pay the money for the printers to print tickets to make it all ticket, because they thought the tickets would be wasted. So we get the draw, the replay the following Tuesday, and the only tickets that were sold were for the seats. And in those days, there were only seats in the main stand. There weren't even seats in the clock stand. And that led to absolute chaos on the night.
Oh, I bet.
Absolute chaos. The thousands and thousands and thousands of people outside. Gates got broken down. Sadly, one person died, not because of the gates being broken down. I think he'd had a heart attack or something.
Right.
And so again, we get to it's 2-2 at the end of the game, but again we lose out right in the last minute with Manchester United having an equaliser. And the third replay we lost, I think it was 5-0 or something like that at Huddersfield. But the gripe from the players was that they were on a bonus for every crowd that was above 45,000. So they'd get so much for 46,000, so much for 47,000.
Well, that was like a clause in the contract.
That was a clause in the contract.
Right.
The estimate that night was that there were 70,000 people in the ground. The official attendance was something like 47,000. So the directors refused to pay the crowd bonus because they took the argument that the official gate through the turnstiles was that number. So and the players went absolutely crazy.
It's ridiculous.
That'll be an interesting.
They never got the bonus.
Like a case of underestimating how sort of dedicated the Sunderland fans are to their tournaments, really, isn't it?
Well, of course, in those days, the Cup was the big tournament.
Yeah.
The big tournament. It's a big tournament now still for lower clubs when they play bigger clubs. Mm-hmm. It's a big tournament once you get to the sixth round. But I think the third, fourth and fifth round, even in those days, the early rounds, the ground would be packed. Yeah. Absolutely packed. So there were two really good memories of Roker Park. And as I said earlier, I wish some of the younger people could have seen Roker Park in its absolute heyday. We're talking about the directors and not printing tickets because they didn't want to pay the money. I wish Netflix had been around in the 60s when they were going into board meetings and the directors, because I tell you what, it was just like a farce, and increasingly I had to go in and take the minutes and everything at the board meetings. And one of the funny things, actually, you might think this is what am I talking about this about football? In those days, chicken was a luxury, and the only time you ever saw chicken was on Christmas Day. Well, the directors used to have their tea and sandwiches and cakes brought in before a board meeting. And one of my key jobs, I had a few key jobs when I was an office boy, was to take the plates from the kitchen and put them on the boardroom table. And there always used to be 2 plates of chicken sandwiches, very twee with the crust cut off. Mm-hmm. And I used to pinch about 8 of the chicken sandwiches. And one day the chairman, unfortunately, came in the kitchen while I'd got a mouthful of chicken sandwich. So that was the last time I ever saw a chicken sandwich.
Right.
But one of my other key jobs was I had to make sure that the cigarette and the cigar boxes were full. So woe betide, I had to order the cigars and the cigarettes and I had to put them on the boardroom table. And woe betide if there wasn't enough cigars and cigarettes for the directors. They were more interested in smoking the cigars and cigarettes than they were talking about business. But the other funny thing was the directors used to try and pick the team. You should have Alan Brown, the manager, and they're all there with us, puffing their cigars away and saying, well, Mr. Brown, I think you should play Charlie Hurley at centre forward. And another director would say, well, I think you should do this and I think you should do that. And Alan Brown used to just let him get on with it. And at the end of the day, he would say, look, you carry on smoking your cigars. I'm the one who picks the team. You don't know a thing about football. But that was directors in those days. I think that was quite common in some ways. I can remember that the England team, there used to be a committee. And it was the committee who selected the England squad, and they selected the team, not the manager. Strange days they were.
Yeah. I'd like to see Martin Bain do something like that now. Wonder how that would go down.
I love the idea of directors up there in their ivory towers with their chicken sandwiches.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's just a sign of the times, I suppose. You know, I mean, what you're seeing there, you see on the shelf in the Sainsbury's meal deal now, don't you? It's crazy how
Every time I buy a chicken sandwich, I'm like...
Anyway, in the interests of time, I'd say... Got about 10 minutes left. One thing I'd like to talk about as well, and we sort of skirted around this, but Roker Park, heyday, was one man who we had as a player, who we would infamously turn down when he applied for that role of manager, and no prizes for guessing who I'm talking about. But I'll go to you, Johnny. Guess. Who do I mean?
Clough.
Obviously, yeah. So, Brian Clough.
Well, I was fortunate or otherwise to, when I got the job as secretary at Derby County, to work with Brian for virtually every day for 3 seasons.
Right.
I knew him well as a player when he was at Sunderland, so that's how I think that's how I got the job, really, at Derby. And he was the biggest Jekyll and Hyde figure that I think I'd ever met in my life.
I bet.
You never knew from one day to the next what sort of mood he would be in. But he had simple messages for players. I remember one day I'm in the tunnel and the match has just finished. Players are coming up the tunnel, and he took one player to one side and... young man, he called everybody young man. Young man, where are your spectacles? And he said, I don't wear glasses, boss. He said, well, you effing should after that performance. And he said, don't come into training tomorrow. And he said, oh, thank you, boss, as though he was being given some time off. He said, I want you to get yourself into town. And I said, I want you to buy 2 things. Oh, yes, boss, what's that? He said, I want you to buy a dog, and I want you to buy a white stick. He said, because that performance out there, he said, there's 2 posts at the end of the ground. And he said, do you know what you're supposed to do? He said, you're supposed to put the ball in between the 2 posts and not keep kicking the ball over the stands. He was a real enigma. And in those days, nowadays you've got so many people involved signing players.
Yeah.
You've got your scouts, you've got your directors of football and all the rest of it. And nothing like that in those days.
No.
And it was basically the secretary and the manager who were involved with all the negotiations, no agents. And one day, Peter Taylor, who was Clough's assistant, we needed somebody. We talked earlier on about wanting some presence in a side. He said, we've got to have some presence in our side. He said, we should sign Dave Mackay.
I mean, I've only ever read about that in The Damned United, but then there was a very big saga around the signing of Dave Mackay.
Yeah, well, Dave Mackay was a what is now a midfield player, but was called a wing half in those days for Tottenham.
Yeah,
and he was coming to the end of his career.
33, wasn't he?
33, 34. Yeah. And Peter Taylor said, I tell you what, if we could sign Dave Mackay, we'll guarantee promotion. And Clough is thinking, we've got absolutely no chance, but we'll try it. So me and him, we jump in a car about 2 days later without any notification to Tottenham or anything else, and go down and go into White Hart Lane and ask to see Bill Nicholson, the manager. And we're told that he's in a meeting. So we sat outside for about half an hour. Eventually we go in, and he greets Brian and said, what are you here for? He said, I want to sign Dave Mackay. He said, you what? He said, he's done, he's finished. He said, no, I want to sign him. He said, well, he's been offered either the manager or the assistant manager's job at Hearts. So he said, you've got no chance, but I'll sell him if you want him, but I don't think he'll sign for you. So he told us where Dave Mackay lived, somewhere in Essex, and we troop off to Essex. Again, no warning, no mobile phones, nothing, just knocked on the door. And of course, Clough is a well-known figure, so Dave Mackay answers the door. And, it's a big, broad Scottish accent. What are you doing here? He said, I've come to sign you. He said, what do you mean? He said, I've come to sign you for Derby County. He said, I'm done. He said, I can't run. He said, I'm not bothered whether you can run or not. He said, I need your experience and you can stroll around in front of the back four. He said, we'll get promotion. And we sat for 4 hours, which is a long time. And he basically sold Derby County to him. And he wore Dave Mackay down to the extent that in the end he just said, just give me a contract and I'll sign it. And that was the best signing that Brian Clough ever made. He always said that.
He won Player of the Year, didn't he, Dave Mackay, that season?
Player of the Year.
The equivalent of whatever that was back then.
Yeah. And he was a great character. And I lived for 6 months before I moved into a house when I went to Derby. I moved into the Midland Hotel. Dave Mackay was there for about 4 months. And we used to have dinner most nights. And then we used to go into the television lounge. Again, no televisions in bedrooms. No. And we used to sit and watch Coronation Street.
Class.
And just talk about football.
Brilliant.
Great character he was.
Yeah. Well, one last question for you, Malcolm, as well. And it's one that I'd be remiss if I missed. And that is, I have to ask, what's this about playing a match against the Buckingham Palace household staff? It's something I've only heard on the grapevine, but I'd like if you could maybe inform me and our listeners of what exactly that is, because it sounds like a very good story.
Well, when I left Derby, I went to Gillingham as secretary, where Len Ashurst, the old Sunderland fullback, was manager there. And I've mentioned already about the mickey taking that goes on in football clubs, and I'd only been there about 6 months when the phone rang, and a fella at the other end said, "It's Bill Lowe here. I'm ringing you from Buckingham Palace." So I thought, this is one of the players ringing me from a phone box. So I didn't believe him at first, and he said, "I'm the chairman of the Royal Household football team. And I'm a big Gillingham fan, and I'd like to invite Gillingham to come up and play a match against the household staff and come back to Buckingham Palace and have tea." So we eventually realised that this fella was genuine. So on the day we go up to London. There's a football pitch near to Buckingham Palace. Play the game, and there's butlers and house staff and all sorts of people playing for the household staff. And we go back, and we think that we're in the team coach. We think we're probably going to go through some back entrance, and we drive through the main gates of Buckingham Palace. Then we go around the back, and we get shown into the household part of the palace, where there's a big tea laid out. And I think there was one of the royals there, but I can't remember who it was, and it certainly wasn't one of the main royals. But what was quite interesting was, even in those days, the security that had to go on before we even got to the game.
I can imagine.
And there was letters going backwards and forwards between me and this Bill Lowe about you can do this and you can't do that and you can't have cameras. But it was a great experience, and we were the first league team ever to have played the Royal Household staff at Buckingham Palace.
Wow.
So there's a big thing, obviously, in the local press and everything else.
It's a shame we can't see the highlights anywhere then.
Yes, yeah.
Nothing on Match Today about that, I don't imagine.
No, I shouldn't think so. And I've still got the Royal Household tie and the badge that we all got. We got in my scrapbook that we all got presented with. So that was a good memory, that one.
What was the score?
The score was something like 17-1 to us. To Gillingham.
We conceded one.
I shouldn't be amazingly surprised, given that was a professional football team against the house staff of Buckingham Palace. But anyway, so just to round this all off, I'd like us to take a lineup and score prediction from each of our members here. We'll go around the table. We'll start with you, Josh. What team do you think, Ross will field against Gillingham, and what will the score be?
What do I think he'll field? It's always different. I think.
Okay, actually, we'll rephrase it.
Yeah.
What team would you want?
Okay, I'd want Maguire to start.
Yep.
For Wyke. I think Honeyman had a good game, but I'd bring him out for McGeoch.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd have McGeoch and Ledbetter as a 2 in front of the 4. I'd probably bring Flanagan back as well. Flanagan and Baldwin. And then 09 right back, James left back. I'd have Grigg, Maguire, McGeady, and I probably would play Gooch because I'm not sold on Morgan yet either, if I'm honest. Not yet.
No, not yet.
Not yet.
It's got time.
Needs to do a bit more for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's my 11, and obviously McLaughlin in goal.
Yeah.
I can't really argue that. I'd probably go for the same team, to be honest. 4-2-3-1 is what I want, yeah.
And what's your score prediction going to be?
Sorry.
Irrespective of whether your team is Ross's team, what do you think the score's going to be?
2-1.
2-1 to us?
2-1
I'll put on the Super 6 2-1, so it has to be 2-1 for that.
What about you, Malcolm?
I used to be secretary at Gillingham. I've got no soft spot for them whatsoever. So I like to think that we kept a clean sheet.
Yeah.
So I'm going for 4-0.
Tremendous.
Let's go for it.
I like
Come
that.
on.
Well, I myself think, obviously McLaughlin in goal. I would have, I think, in the heart of defence, I would personally persist with Dunn and Baldwin.
Right.
In spite of how poor they were, I think I'd like to maybe give them the faith to have a go again. I'd have James, obviously, at left back. Oviedo, if he was fit, would come in for me. Still set a lot of store by the wee Costa Rican, but hey-ho. I'd have Matthews, other side.
Would you?
Yep.
Right.
My sort of like holding two, I'd agree with you, Josh. I'd take out Honeyman.
Yeah.
Necessary evil for Dylan McGee alongside Grant Ledbetter. In the hole, you got Maguire. Has to start. I think that's as clear as anything else. The sky's blue, the grass is green. Maguire has to start based on his last performance. Then I think your wide men, I would have McGeady and Morgan. I personally have a lot of faith in them, to be fair.
No 9.
No 9. No, again, necessary evils. I think that's how I'd do it. And up front, I'd have Will Grigg. And I think, like I said, off the bench, I'd like Watmore and Gooch to come on to maybe do that. Like I said before, maybe to bombard the team late on in the 75th minute.
Yeah.
With just some very energetic, very aggressive sort of wide players who can function well as an inside forward if they need to. Then I think you've got players like Charlie White on the bench. If you need physicality, with an asterisk when he comes on. As is so often the case, but.
Football's it's all about our opinions, isn't it?
It is. It's a game of opinions.
It would be
is the
so
cliche.
boring.
Yeah.
If we all agreed about every single player, every single formation.
If we all reeled off the same
just have to
thing.
go on Twitter.
I actually think there's probably one player in our squad that most people would agree about being a decent buy and a decent player, and that's the keeper.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
I think everybody else we've probably got such varying opinions about.
Yeah.
But that's part of football.
Yeah.
Yep.
The debate, the discussion.
Yeah. That's what football is. It's a game of opinions, save for the outstanding players who just get the whole unanimous vote. John McLaughlin this season's been tremendous.
The big sort of divide is I don't remember the last time I saw someone have this much divided opinion, but Honeyman is a player that either people think are great or that absolutely kind of stand him.
Yeah.
And it's very strange. I've never
very polarising
seen
opinions.
I think I'm one of the few in the middle.
I mean,
So
to be
you're
fair,
also one of
it's
those
weird, I
people.
don't mind him.
You're also one of those people, Josh, who is like okay with Marmite.
No, don't like Marmite.
Oh, right,
No.
yeah.
No, I'm not that weird.
No, that would be I think a bit more controversial. But
Yeah.
hey ho. Anyway, so I would say, to be honest, for my score prediction, so we've got a 2-1.
Yeah.
We've got a
2-1.
a 2-1 and a 4-0. I'm going to say 3-1. I think we'll let a goal in. I think at some point
Yeah,
we might let a goal in early on, and then I think we'll come back and we'll win 3-1 because I think
I'll take it.
we've got that resilience and that belief that we can come back from our shortcomings. But regardless of how the goals transpire, I think we're going to win 3-1, and we're going to do it fairly comfortably. So yeah, thank you very much for tuning in to the Roker Report podcast, and if you've listened right to the end, thank you for tolerating me on my first ever appearance as the guy who sat here, which is no point of reference because this is an audio-based platform, not a visual one.
I got it. I loved it.
You got it. Yeah. Well, basically, I'm sat in a seat which is different from the other side of the panel because I'm hosting.
He's the debut of Alex as the host.
That's what
That
I'm
was a
doing.
better way to say it.
That was a better way of saying it, and it totally escaped me. But yeah. Anyway, thank you very much, Malcolm, for coming on and giving us some fantastic stories again. It's always a pleasure. And thank you, Josh and Johnny, for your
Contributions.
for your two penny
stories.
No.
Cool stories
Yeah.
about.
No, yeah.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Yeah, well, there you go. So yeah,
Pleasure
thank you
as
very
always.
much. Yep. Thank you very much, and good night.
Some exchange betting companies run short-lived promotions, like months-long offers of low commission. At BetDAC, we wanted to change the way we did things, so we set our commission at 2% permanently. That's 2% on football, horse racing, golf, almost any sport. 2%. That's just one way that BetDAC is changing for the better. For the better, like you. BetDAC, the 2% commission exchange.
Over 18s only, please gamble responsibly.